Design, test, and controlling of SAP authorizations. In this video, you will learn our best practice to how to design and execute the right SAP authorization strategy for your project. The video is divided into the following topics: the authorization strategy design, configuring your authorization design, and finally managing your authorization design. So let's have a look first on the authorization strategy design. So there's several elements that needs to be included in your authorization strategy. First one is to determine what are the functions that the users needs to have access to. And this is materialized in the SAP business process design deliverable. Secondly, you need to look at what are the job roles that are required. And this is materialized in the organizational design deliverable. Then you need to look at which users are assigned to each role, or which users are to be assigned to each role. What access is assigned to each job role, which you now have the users assigned to. Then you need to check for any segregation of duty conflicts or SOD conflicts. And basically, just to make the term clear to everyone, you need to ensure that there is no conflict in what roles a certain person is assigned, and make sure that there is no one who can bypass your business controls. We'll get into this in much more detail later on. Then you also need to look at how will your authorization design be tested. Now, authorization is a minor thing of your SAP project, I would say, but not at least it is the thing that is causing the most frustration, because this is really where you have the impact directly from the end users. You might have the entire SAP system ready at go live, but if the users cannot log on, or they have a bad experience logging on, where they cannot do what they're supposed to do due to an error in the access assigned to the users, it fosters a very negative experience and a lot of noise in most cases from the users. So you need to really look at how your authorization design is going to be tested. And then you also need to look at how will you monitor your design to ensure that there is no violation of the rules, there's no people granted access that they should not be granted, and the whole process of how to control and manage changes to your authorization. And exactly, the changes is the last point. You need to, when you do your authorization strategy design, you need to think into that. How are you going to manage the ongoing changes that will happen? That can be new and or existing users that need to have changes to access, or new users coming in. You need to have a process for that. So this is the 8 elements of your authorization strategy design deliverable, and it all needs to be considered and documented. So let's try and look at some of the elements when we are talking about authorization design. So let's look first at the job role security versus the data level security. So we have a schematic here, which I'll go through in just a minute, and basically just to recap or summarize what it is you want to achieve, and that is that users are given access to perform particular functions that are prerequisites for their specific job duties. Access to function and data is determined by a user's job and or the organization in which they work. So, to go through the schematic here, you have the transaction security and you have data level security. Data level security means transaction XXX. So this is a transaction code in SAP that is on a data level, or it might be that under that transaction code you even have certain company or KDS elements that is only under this company code, or it's only under this whatever the KDS element is, that you are allowed to do whatever access that is granted to you. So this is on the data level. Now when we talk transaction security, we are talking what are the job roles. So in this case it's a financial analyst. So this is the transaction security level. This is that all financial analysts will be able to do this. So as you see here on the arrows, transaction authorization, e.g. For instance a journal entry, the financial analyst will be able to or be allowed to perform that. And the data authorization is that this journal entry is allowed to be performed on this particular company code, this profit center, etc., whatever the KDS element is. And based on these two things, the user will either get an access denied or an access granted. If the user is in the financial analyst role and they're trying to do this under a company code which has been defined in the transaction data level security here, then you will get a granted access granted. Whereas if you are not a financial analyst, you are from the IT department and you try to do this transaction, you will get an access denied. So this is how those elements works together. Now, another important thing about authorization is looking at the organizational design, and this is something that can be, in some projects I've seen this being quite confusing to many people, because the terms might have different meanings in the organization as and another meaning in an SAP project. But basically, first of all, to be process flow, one, you need to define the end user role using inputs from the to be process flow. What are the processes that is going to be performed in your solution? Secondly, you need to map those roles to jobs. You basically need to make a job catalog. So you make a catalog of the different jobs and you map the roles into that job catalog. And then finally, based on that, you develop your job profile. So once you have the process, you know what roles is required to do that process in your, and it's been mapped to a job catalog, then you can go in and define the different job profiles which you need in your solution. So if you take the previous slide, for instance, a financial analyst, that's a job profile. What will that job profile encompass of? So another thing is how activities and roles related to jobs and organizations are related. So basically, activity, a task that you need to perform, and you can have several tasks or activities. They will then form a role. So a role is a group of activities or tasks. Now, a role can be one job or it can be several roles to form a job. So you have a job which is one or more roles, and a role which is one or more activities and tasks. So you have here, you have a one-to-many relation. It can be or it can be a one-to-one, and you have a one-to-one or one-to-many relation here. And then finally, several jobs is then grouped together and can be part of an organization. So if it's, you find out that you have a accounting manager, accounting analyst, accounting controller, then they will in the organization probably be under the finance department, led by the CFO or the vice president of accounting, however your organization is structured. And that will then, each role will then be, each job will then consist of one or many roles, which each will have one or more activity. So this is the relation between this. And I know this can be a little bit difficult depending on what your background is, and we will be having some downloadable material that you can help aid you in this design. And also this is a topic that I'll be happy to discuss in the forum. But for now, let's try and move on to some of the other aspect of the authorization design. So here we have a process, which is contract vendor for quotation, approved purchase, so this is the procurement to pay process, approved purchase, create purchase order, and send purchase order to the vendor. So this is a process that is in your process design. Now, to execute this process, you will have a need to involve several different job roles. So you will have a purchasing role, which might be the quotation, it might be the purchase order creation. You will have an approving role, where someone needs to approve the quotation and approve the purchase order. And then you might have a dispatcher or a person that will then communicate this to your vendor. So in this simplified case, we have three roles. We have a purchasing role, approving role, and a sending role. So let's try and look at the combination where these three roles can work together. So combination 1, purchasing role and approving role. Combination 2, you have the purchasing role and the sending role, and approving role and sending role. So this is the different roles. And what we mean with the combination is, if I, as a user, I can have either the purchasing and the approving role, or the purchasing or the sending role, or the approving and the sending role. Or it might be that I only have one, depending on how big your organization is. Nevertheless, in combination 1, you are violating the good business control practice, because you are now giving one person, the ability to both do quotations, purchase orders, and also approve the purchase orders. And that basically disable your business control. So in this combination, you are having a conflict that should not be allowed. You are having several roles assigned in one combination, or to one job function, which is really not advisable. Let's try to look at another example. So here we have individual A, this is a person assigned to job A, and that job consists of the purchasing and the sending role from the example above. So that person will be involved in quotation, create purchase order, and sending purchase orders. Then you have an individual B, which then will be the approving role. So that person will only be assigned to the job of approving purchase orders. And in this scenario, you will see that individual A will do the groundwork and individual B will do the approval. So you have divided the process from up here into two job functions, and there's no conflict. One is creating the purchase order, and a separate entity or separate person is approving it. That is the business control you want to have. Now there's still possibility for fraud, but in this case they now need to collateral on the on working together on actually making the fraud. So this comes down to the segregation of duty analysis, of the SODA. So let's look at the method. So first of all, you need to check conflicts between roles that have been combined into one job, which we saw on the previous slide in the different combinations. Then you need to be clear on what are the rules that you will do the SODA analysis based on. And those rules should be agreed with auditors. It should be clear to everyone that is involved in controlling and business compliance in your organization. And all identified conflicts, if any, hopefully none, to be documented in an SODA report. Now you might have in some organization, I've seen where the staff is very lean, it's very few people, and therefore they have to share responsibilities, and you need to have some robustness in backup roles for certain jobs. And in that case, there might be no choice than to accept certain segregation of duty conflicts. And that's fine as long as it's documented, everyone is aware of it, the auditors is aware of it, then it is something that can be controlled and it can be reported on. Now just one thing on the rules checking. Now it doesn't make sense for you to do the SOD segregation of duty analysis based on your own rules. It has to be a common set of rules, so that especially the auditors when they sign the books for your organization, they are aware of this and they can defend this should there be any investigation. So let's try to look at it in a schematic form here. So here you have job 1, or you have the job, so you have job A, you have job B, and you have job C. And those jobs has been assigned to 3 different roles. So job A will have access to do role A and role B, and job function B will have access to do job A and role C. So users are assigned to jobs. This is the opposite way of looking at it. Normally you would have the users in the top, but the relations are correct. So you have users assigned to jobs, jobs assigned, roles assigned to jobs as well. So in this case, job B have a conflict because according to the rules agreed and your segregation of duty analysis, job B is allowed to perform role A and role C, which should not be allowed. And this could be from before, it could be a purchasing creation and a purchasing approval. This is not allowed. So job B is not a valid job profile. And that means that because job B has a conflict, all users that is assigned to that job will have a conflicting job function or conflict that needs to be resolved or needs to be accepted. Let's look at it another way where we add a few more dimensions. So this chart is really to try and have everything come together. So you have your new business process. This is the business process you have designed. The business process requires a number of job roles to be created. And for those job roles, you will need to make sure that there is authorization profiles. That means what access is required for each job role. There's training. What does the job, how do I fulfill my job? And the training and the authorization has to be assigned to individual employees. This is how the employee, the job role, the training, which we've been through in the previous lesson, and the authorization all comes together. And job roles, remember here that it doesn't have to be only SAP. It can be both SAP or non-SAP tasks. It can be interface tasks. It can be jobs. It can be other systems where there is transactions that needs to happen, and it can be manual tasks. So once you have made sure that this is in place to support your business process, we don't do anything else that is not related to the business process. This is the trigger. Then you go in and you take these job roles and you document it in the job profiles and the job description. And once you have that, you can then make that your job library, the different position that you need to fill, and you will then assign these individual employees into the job role. So financial analyst, accounting manager, accountant, purchaser, purchase approver, and so on. So this hopefully gives a picture of how the different elements fits together. Now we haven't gone in details of all of them, but we'll use the forum to discuss this much more. Now for configuring your authorization design, you need certain tools. So you need, first step is the transactions you need. You need to be clear on what transaction codes is required that users are having access to, and you group those transaction codes into single roles in SAP called single roles. You group the single roles into composite roles, and then you assign composite roles to users. So one single role can belong to multiple composite roles. This is not a one-to-one relation, and a user can be assigned multiple composite roles. It all comes down to your segregation of duty analysis. So with that, I hope it's gives you a good idea of how the different element works together, and you need to have someone who understand how to set up the authorization in SAP. As a project manager, you need to make sure that this process is executed. You have your business process design. Let's just jump back. You have your business process design completed. You have job roles mapped. You have training courses mapped to the job roles, so you know what training, which roles is required. You have authorization profiles mapped to the job roles, and you have all of that mapped to individual employees in SAP, as well as you have you go to HR and you find what are the job profiles and positions that I need to operate my new SAP solution, my new SAP process. And it might be that certain positions has to change. You need to change different positions in your organization. You might need to have new positions created, and you might need to terminate positions. And this is a sensitive matter because it is all about people. We will look at change management much more when we get in the final course, where we are looking at the final task before go live. But just be aware that change management, and this is very sensitive, and it has to happen throughout your project. So let's go back to the managing your authorization design. So again, I'm a big fan of tracking sheets. So here is one way of tracking how close are you to completing your authorization design, and you can use this as reporting to your team, to management, whoever the stakeholders that might want to know this. So you have different tasks. You have the role definition, business mapping, and then you have the definition of what are the transaction codes you need for each business process, and then you have the system configuration itself. So do not forget testing. And for the testing part, I treat this as separate, just like the UAT, SIT, unit test, and so on, and I'll test this separately. In some projects I combine it. It is normal to combine the testing of authorizations with the testing of your integration test or your user acceptance test. Definitely user acceptance test. And then make sure that you have a similar process in place for managing changes during the project and after go live. So after go live, if there is a change or a new person, you need to run through the same steps in the system. You need to have it set up, you need to have it designed, you need to do your analysis that there's no segregation of duties, conflicts, and so on. So with that, let's do a summary. So after completing this video, you should now have a good understanding of how the different elements of the authorization design fits together, as well as what is the best practice of the elements to include in your SAP authorization strategy. So this can be complicated and this can be very simple, depends on how your system is set up and how your organization function. And for some people this will be completely new ground, but as always we are happy to discuss it much more in the forum. Thank you very much.